I'm going to turn it over to Jane Benefield, who's the moderator and the organizer of today's forum.
Thank you, Susan.
Take it away, Jane.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here today because I hardly had to do anything to get these ladies to come and talk about the issues that we have occurring out there in the community. I mean, in high school I wanted to be a cheerleader but didn't fit that profile. This is what I want to be a cheerleader for. Thank you so much. I don't have to do the housekeeping business, but remember, we are a nonprofit. Unlike the NFL, that's a nonprofit, we have no money. So help us when you can. We're here today to discuss crimes against women, including domestic violence, rape, trafficking, and the list goes on. Maybe one day a forum like this will not be necessary, but for now, however it is, everyone from Obama to school children are now talking about eradicating domestic violence. Shh. In Santa Barbara, we have a myriad of resources and people to meet the needs of women and men who are abused and victimized. Our speakers have long-term experience in their respective fields. I have prepared a summary of our speakers' biographies on your table to save time, but it does not make them less than. They are very accomplished. I just want them to be able to speak and not me. You can imagine that all these participants are highly educated and thoroughly trained in their positions. This handout also gives you contact information for each of the agencies should you have a friend, yourself, or a relative who needs this information. And I think there's a lot of abuse going on that we don't hear about. So, right now, fasten your seatbelts for our first speaker, District Attorney Joyce Dudley.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, I have a little to say about you.
Oh, God. Mom, you want to come up and talk about me?
Is that your mom?
Of course.
Oh, hi, Mom. Thanks for coming. Yeah. Oh, I have to tell you, your daughter is something. When this forum was envisioned, I didn't know Joyce, although I saw you at Home Depot the other day. I emailed her and invited her to be a speaker, and before my hands were off the keypad, she agreed enthusiastically and offered more people also to come who are here today. They all agreed, too, before I could even tell her thank you. So she specializes in sexual assault crimes, crimes against children, murder, and hate crimes. She is so dynamic, it's hard to imagine she sleeps. And in addition, she raised 4 boys. So I'm going to stop here. You come on up and wow us, okay? Thank you, Joyce.
You know, no introduction is complete without telling you I finally have a girl. I have a granddaughter. I'm obsessed. Would any of you like to see a picture? I'll pass it around, absolutely. Thank you for having me come speak with you today, and thank you for inviting my colleagues. I know half of you, and it's wonderful to see you. Violence against women. It's a misnomer in my mind because I think the emphasis has always been that this is a woman's issue. When I think about violence against women, I think about my 4 sons, and I think if there was any violent act perpetrated against me, it would cut them to the core, and my husband and Dave Cole. What I've learned is that through 25 years of prosecuting violent crimes is that the feeling people who care about other people have, and the feelings that other people have for people they care about, when it happens to them, it's actually worse when it happens to someone who cares about them. And I'm looking at in this audience, I'm seeing a whole bunch of men here. So maybe we need to rephrase this and think of it as violence against women and those that care about them, because vicarious pain can sometimes be the worst. So thank you all for coming to hear us speak today. When does violence against women first occur? I'm going to go to the womb for that, and we have my mom to thank for that thought. My mom used to pray for 2 girls. That's all she wanted. She just wanted to have 2 girls. And her thought was that women could change the world. And that was her thoughts in the 40s and the 50s. And she said, okay, I haven't been able to do it myself, but I could do this vicariously. I could raise 2 women who could change the world. Her expectation always was that children will rise to your lowest expectations. So my sister became a neurologist, and now she's a worldwide educator. I became an educator, and now I'm your district attorney. How'd she do that? How'd she raise two women in the 40s and 50s to believe and to be so successful? It wasn't about being a helicopter mother. I got to tell you, I was on my own, 7, 8 years old. I was shopping, I was cooking, I was doing everything. It wasn't by saying, "Did you get your homework done?" It was by respecting me. Even when I was a little tiny munchkin, she respected me. And I was not easy to respect. I had ADD, and I am, and I was and still am half deaf. So I was a problem in the classroom. And she would repeatedly get called into the classroom and into the principal's office, and they would tell her all the things I had done that day that were a problem. And she would at first patiently listen and then look at them right in the eye and say, "It's not her, it's you." She said, "My daughter is a born leader. Put her in a leadership role and she will survive in your environment and thrive the rest of her life." And that wasn't working out so well for them, so they stopped calling her in. Then I remember one day coming home and saying to my mother, "This mean girl said I had bad breath." And my mother said, "Oh, well, she's just not sophisticated." What did that mean? I didn't know, but I knew I didn't feel so bad about it, although she did manage to put certs in my lunch from then on. So she had my back, but she always made me feel like I was valuable. Now, what about boys? When does violence against women begin for boys? I'm going to suggest the same place, but where do they look? They look to their fathers to see how their fathers treat their mothers. And then the next phase, they look to see how their mothers treat themselves. And I could tell you that I decided to go back to law school when we had 3 children, 3 boys under the age of 7, and we chose to have another child, thinking the obvious, but no, it was a 4th boy. And I went back to law school at night, and I worked during the day, and my husband was the most supportive man imaginable. Love you, darling. And so I felt very guilty because I wasn't around 3 nights of the week. I wasn't helping with food. I wasn't helping with homework. I got to do this great thing about going off to law school, only one of my sons would plaster himself against the glass as I would leave, sobbing, "Mommy, don't go." I felt terrible. I later found out this same child went into his kindergarten classroom, stole one of my law school books, and for show and tell said, "My mommy's a student like me." And I didn't even know he took the law school book. So what does that tell us? That's when he began to learn about what mommies do. So why is your district attorney telling all these personal stories about her life on a subject of violence against women? Because I want you to think of your district attorney's office as a very different place than the place where people are prosecuted for crimes, because we do so much more than that. I'm going to give you the 30-foot view, and then these extraordinary women are going to be talking about the details. So, our approach is prevention, intervention, prosecution, and reentry. Prevention. Before they become parents, we have a vital truancy program that keeps kids in school. All of our deputy district attorneys go out throughout the county, all 50 of them, and talk in schools to children. We have a LEAD program in the elementary school that teaches them about what's just and what's unjust. I am a fighting back mentor through CATA. I have a little girl named Rosie in my life, and many of the other deputy district attorneys take it personal and have their own mentee through Fighting Back, through Boys and Girls Club, through Big Sister, Big Brother. We give speeches continuously, and we talk about engaging in high-risk behavior, and that's when I follow up on my mom's philosophy. I don't tell the kids, "Don't do this." This "just say no" is an insult. My mother never taught me just say no. My mother said, "Think about the ramifications of your decisions." I tell kindergartners that, and they get it. Think about the ramifications of your decisions. You're showing respect for that person, and you're showing them that what they do will affect themselves now and in the future. We have intervention, we have programs, we have specialty courts, mental health, drug, veterans court, restorative courts for the homeless, where my dear friend Emily is very involved, and she'll tell you more about that. We have task forces, anti-trafficking task force, sexual assault response team task force, anti-animal abuse task force, because we now know that people that abuse animals are more likely to abuse people. So we're focused on that at your district attorney's office. We prosecute domestic violence cases, even if the domestic violence victim isn't willing to hold her perpetrator responsible for what happened to her. And my relationship with you has certainly inspired me for many years to make sure that we keep doing that. And sexual assault cases, we let people know that no is a real word, and your district attorney's office is going to back you up on that. We also do bring in experts to explain to juries about battered women's syndrome, about child sexual assault accommodation syndrome. We spend about $100,000 a year in this county bringing in experts to help educate your juries. So that's a big picture of some of the things we do. And now it is thrilling for me to introduce Elsa. May I? Or are you going to?
Certainly.
Okay. Elsa, pardon me?
I did want to mention Marcia.
I always want to mention Marcia. Thank you. What would you like me to say about Marcia?
How gracious she was to have.
Yes. Well, I recommended Marcia to be on the panel, and then Marcia recommended the new person in charge of therapy session, or what? Clinical. And because Marcia hasn't been trained in this, but her heart and soul has always been in helping others, whether it's CALM or domestic violence. Should I talk for a while about Marcia? Are we done?
A couple minutes.
That's it. Love Marcia. Okay. Anyway, Elsa's been doing this work for 17 years? 18 years.
Here in Santa Barbara.
Okay. Right. And she's the go-to person for the reason that sexual assault in this community is dealt with at the high level it is, I'm going to have to say, is because of Elsa. So, Elsa, you're next. Okay, never mind. Who am I introducing?
Here, let me.
Megan, you're on. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we can save questions for more items that are a little more specific, like, let's see. Sorry.
Megan.
Megan, I know you're here. Hang on, don't go away. Well, okay. This is Megan Reinschild. She's from the Victim Witness Assistant Program, and she is the director of the Santa Barbara County District's Attorney's Office in that area. She's going to give us a brief overview on this on her complex job, and particularly human trafficking. Okay. For 20 years, Megan has been responding to the needs of victims, has been the director of the county-wide program since 1997. You just don't look old enough, I'm sorry. She is responsible for the oversight of a program whose staff annually serves over 3,500 victims of violent crime and their families. Her credentials are impeccable. Please read the sheet. As you can imagine, oh, well, anyway, let's take it away, Megan.
Okay, thank you. I actually have the pleasure of having worked with and for Joyce Dudley since 1994 in the district attorney's office. And it probably goes without saying, and I'm not trying to get brownie points, that she's the best boss that any woman and any man could ever ask for. She is so supportive of our role, and that is in the Victim Witness Assistance Program in the DA's office, and totally gets what it is to see the criminal justice system through the lens of a victim. And really, if you read the news, if you watch the news, many times what you see is an emphasis on the perpetrator, right? So we know a lot more about the perpetrator than we do of the victim. And so the Victim Witness Assistance Program, sort of by extension, you can imagine, is not a program that a lot of people know about. Unfortunately, unless they're a victim of a crime themselves, or as Joyce suggested, somebody in their family has been victimized. And then they come to know a lot about us. In the course of my career at the DA's office, I can tell you that the one thing I've learned is the resilience of the human spirit, and certainly the resilience of women in the face of violence, and how both individuals and societies respond to that. So just a little background about Victim Witness and kind of how we came to be. California was actually at the forefront of creating victim witness assistance programs in the 70s. It came on the heels of after the civil rights movement, when people started to consider, what about victims and what about their input and what about that in the context of the criminal justice system? And so now, many years later, we have legislated in the penal code the victim witness assistance programs all throughout the state. So these programs exist in every single county, and most of them are based in district attorneys' offices. There's a few that are nonprofit based, a few in sheriff's departments, and a few in probation departments. So the advocates in our office are one of the first people that a victim of violent crime will talk to after a crime has occurred. And what we try to do is orient the individual to the criminal justice system, allow them an opportunity for input, support them during the court process, make human as much as we can the process that's going to ensue, introduce them and integrate them into our family, our team, and make them feel heard. As far as violence against women is concerned, and statistically speaking, about 35 to 40% of our cases, individuals that we serve, are domestic violence victims. And about 15% are sexual assault victims, primarily women, although there certainly are men. And another probably about 10% are child abuse victims, and I would say there's probably about a 60-40 spread, so 60% girls, 40% boys. It's hard to speak to you in just 15 minutes about all of the various things that we do, but I was asked to speak about human trafficking. So I want to tell you a little story about that. About probably now 3 years ago, I have a good friend and colleague that works for the FBI. And unbeknownst to me, 20 years ago, the FBI also has a victim assistance program. So they cover crimes where there's cross-jurisdictional crimes committed across state lines, across national lines. And she said to me, hey, Megan, you know, Santa Barbara County, you kind of have a problem that you may not be seeing, and that is there's human trafficking in your community. And I thought, I don't really know about that. We're not really seeing that. And I honestly, at this stage in the game, 4 years ago, didn't really know what that meant. Well, fast forward about a year later, and there was a federal grant, and Joyce and I spoke about it, to create a human trafficking task force. And these words of my colleague, who has more of a 30,000-foot view, perhaps than I do, because she's working across many jurisdictions, came to my mind, and Joyce and I talked about, should we apply for these funds for a human trafficking task force? And again, I had this question, I'm not really sure what this means for our community. So what we decided to do, and with Joyce's blessing and huge support, is pull together some people that might know something more about this than we did in the trenches in the DA's office. And I've never seen anything like it in the 20-plus years that I've been in the office in terms of the range of participation from federal, Homeland Security, FBI, on down to, and I don't mean this in a hierarchical way, but all the way to the faith community, rape crisis, domestic violence solutions, legal aid. Everybody came together to say, we want to do something about this. So now we have a task force about 2 years going. We have about 75 participating members across probably about 40 agencies. And Ventura and San Luis started to recognize a problem too, and I'll tell you a little bit about some specifics in a minute. And so they started coming to our task force, so it turned into this tri-county task force. And here I was thinking to myself, I mean, mostly I was learning from everybody else about what's happening in their neck of the woods, right? So Homeland Security could talk about their vantage point, the FBI could talk about their vantage point, and the faith community could talk about what they were doing. So a little while after that, I got a call from my same colleague, and she said, Megan, we're doing a recovery in Santa Barbara of a 17-year-old girl from out of state who's a sex trafficking victim who has been brought across state lines and ended up in Santa Barbara County. And this obviously became very real to me because, number one, she was looking to me as the victim witness director in our community for services. What are we going to do? How are we going to assist? And it really brought it home for me, and it's been a very illuminating experience working with just this one individual, and she has taught me so much about what is needed in terms of housing, in terms of mental health, in terms of working across our normal silos. For example, a lot of the underage girls that we're seeing are very, very vulnerable. A lot of them are coming out of foster care with a huge abuse history, very complex mental health. So we have to be thinking about how do we interface with juvenile probation, who then incarcerates this individual because she has a warrant from out of state. And how do we make that a victim-focused, a survivor-focused environment? How do we bring in alcohol, drug, and mental health into the scheme of things? How do we interface with Rape Crisis Center and make sure that that victim that may look like a perpetrator to law enforcement on the face of it, even though she's a minor, receives advocacy service? How do we make sure that that individual receives a sexual assault response, or excuse me, a SANE exam, a sexual assault exam, forensic exam as needed? So these are all the things that we're now contemplating 2 years later, and there's some very exciting work being done. We got some funding through Santa Barbara Foundation to do a needs assessment because, remember, I told you I really didn't know anything about this a couple of years ago, not as much as I felt we needed to know. And so the Santa Barbara Foundation supported us, and we have a researcher doing a very comprehensive needs assessment about what's working, what's not working, and what can we do about it. We're working very closely with the faith community who's interested in setting up some housing options for minor girls that don't have a better option than either to go home to an abusive household or go into a group home where they're going to be recruited out and run away. The risk of runaway in this population extremely high. There's so many vulnerabilities in this population that these are just some of the things that we're looking at. We're working closely with legal aid and looking at some of the legal options for individuals. So right now in our community, since we started the task force, we have sort of built it. We have a great team of first responders now. We brought a lot of training to the area, and eyes are becoming wide open to this. And in a period of 2 years, we've probably seen about 7 or 8 cases identified that we might not have before had we not gotten the kind of training and awareness raising that we have. So it's a whole new world. I never thought I'd be standing up in front of all of you speaking about this topic. It always seemed far away to me, and I always thought of it as international trafficked victims initially. That's when a lot of the money was coming down from the federal government. The initial push was around internationally trafficked victims. And what we've actually found is our most vulnerable populations are domestic girls, or girls from the United States that don't have 2 legs to stand on and don't have the support. So we, the District Attorney's Office, as Joyce mentioned early on, have, I think, the perspective which is prevention and intervention, and working with people where they are, regardless of what the criminal outcomes may be, and sometimes regardless of where they've been in terms of the other offenses that they may have committed as a juvenile. So I'm really proud of the work that Joyce has allowed us to embark upon with our partners here at the table. And if you have questions, I might have the answers. So thank you for inviting me. Yeah.
Jane, could I just make one comment? First of all, you just got a piece of the incredible work that Megan has done. Why she's giving me any credit, I have no idea, because I can't raise her salary. But she has single-handedly brought this, shine the light on human trafficking. And what I want you to understand is that it's nights, it's weekends, it's what she does. And recently, we had the first trial of a human trafficker in Santa Barbara County. He was charged with 76 counts, and the jury found him guilty of all 76 counts. There would not have been a trial but for the work and the effort of Megan, and would you please join me in congratulating her? Thank you.
We have time for a couple questions. Yeah, wait for the microphone. Thank
I too know so little, except reading in the international media. How do girls fall into being trapped that way? And then how do they come to somebody's attention that can help?
Is it Mike?
You're on. Isn't you on?
He's getting it on.
Okay. That's a great question. So a lot of the girls that fall into this do not have positive role models in their lives. They don't have stable parenting most often. Many times they're in the child welfare system and bouncing around from foster home to foster home and end up in group homes. And the incidence of sexual abuse in many of these girls past is about 80%. So the primary indicator, aside from being in foster care and being in the child welfare system, is a history of sexual abuse. And unfortunately, pimps, if you will, know this, and they are very savvy about recruiting girls who are very, very vulnerable. And it should be said that the average recruitment age, which was a shock to me, is about 11 or 12 years old. So when I think about this, it's so disturbing because I think of myself as an 11 or 12-year-old girl and how vulnerable you are, and you're looking at adolescence and you have people around you that care about you, and yet security or confidence is hard to come by at that age. And so for these girls that have absolutely no one saying anything positive to them, somebody that comes along and says, I'm going to buy you a new pair of jeans, I'm going to get you clothing, I'm going to buy you a purse and makeup and get your nails done, and they have no one telling them that they care for them or love them. It is the hook that will take many girls in that situation. And that's many times how recruitment begins.
And then the way we find out about them is they're arrested, for the most part, for being prostitutes or for committing petty thefts. So they come into the system as arrestees, and then what we do here in Santa Barbara County, which I have to tell you is unique, we don't treat them as perpetrators, we treat them as victims. And it's unique to this county, it's unique to some other places in California, and the other people are just going to have to catch up to us because no one wakes up, no one decides as a woman, I think I'll become a prostitute. And if you're a prostitute at the age of 13, you didn't have my mom as mom.
Let's have another.
How do they what?
Noticed as prostitutes.
How are they noticed as prostitutes? Because they're working at massage parlors where they have prostitutions. They're standing on corners that are known to have prostitutions. And they also, predominantly nowadays, it's on the internet. There are various websites. So you can go on the internet and find a 13-year-old if you're interested.
If I could just say one more thing about that. One of the things that we've really tried to do, and one was the first things that we did, was bring people to the county who were already investigating these crimes effectively. Orange County has a great model, and we brought some law enforcement personnel up that have become very expert in identifying girls, because girls will not say, oh, by the way, I'm being trafficked. They do not see themselves as victims. They do tend not to like the police at all. They will not disclose in a forensic interview type of situation. So really it's incumbent on us, that is law enforcement, juvenile probation, and rape crisis and child welfare, to ask the right questions and be patient and create rapport, which is a very, very challenging task, but one that can be done and has been done at other places. So we're working towards that countywide with each and every first responder.
One more question? Thank you, Barbara.
This is more of a statement, but I would like to find the answer to it. Like this? Okay. About 3 years ago, we had a woman come to our forum and talked about, she had bought a large piece of property in Los Alamos where she was going to build a boarding junior high school for foster children. And it was so exciting, and everybody was so excited about it. My husband and I went up and looked at the land. It's absolutely gorgeous. And then we've heard nothing. And I wonder if you could tell us something about that, because that sounded to me like a perfect solution to many of these problems that we're facing.
I know a few things, just a little bit about that, but it sounds like, Emily, you know more than I do.
If my mic is, I just was with her last night, actually, and she was talking about it. It's a great, was a great vision and idea, and they were able to get the charter, but they weren't able to pull together the funding to make it happen. But actually in Washington, D.C., they've given that charter and that, that paperwork to others who are implementing it elsewhere, and it is really based on that idea that youth in the foster system need that level of support. So they had to sell that property, but they would still like to see something like that happen in our county.
And I'm working with the president of the board of YMCA that deals with the aspect of Noah's Anchorage and other organizations. I've met with him once. Megan and I are meeting with him again next week. The trafficked victim that we had initially was at Noah's Anchorage, and I think that that would be a great local environment for us to be able to use in the future, and he seemed very supportive of that, so fingers crossed.
Thank you very much. I attended a conference, I keep bragging about this, I think, at the UN a couple of years ago on violence against women, where thousands of people attended from all over the world. Mostly I was sort of interested in New York, and in New York, cab drivers are somewhat of a conduit for trafficking, from the perpetrator to the victim. Yeah. And they had to bring in the police and try and convince them of what's going on, but they still consider these women victims in New York. Not victims.
Not victims.
Perpetrators, yeah.
Okay, I was getting excited. I thought things were getting better in New York.
I lied.
Yeah.
Now I'm a little confused. Are we going with Lisa or are we going with Elsa?
I think
Who follows nicely? Okay, thank you. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Elsa Granados is the executive director for the Santa Barbara Rape Clinic. She has served as the executive director for, 18 years, Elsa, and has been in the field to end violence against women and children for 30 years. She has conducted public policy that affects survivors of sexual violence on a state and national level. Personally, I cannot imagine a more excruciating career path, but I imagine she has hundreds of rewarding stories of survival and hope with former victims who are now thriving. So let Elsa talk about it.
Good afternoon. I often get that comment that my job, my career must be a downer. It couldn't be far from the truth. Because actually at the Rape Crisis Center, we offer avenues to transformation for various people who come through our doors. They come through our doors with their heart and souls sunk, and not in one day, maybe not in a week, but over a period of time, and it varies for different people, but over a period of time, they are uplifted and they're reminded of their powerful selves. So I couldn't be more happy than to be and see that transformation. I wanted to say that as someone who has been in this field for many decades, I have watched the issue of trafficking evolve itself as it comes forward to rape crisis centers. But before I go into that, let me tell you, for those of you who are not familiar with the rape crisis center in town, a little bit about us. But let me start with the bad news is that we need a rape crisis center. The good news is that we've got one, because it's not true in every community. And so we were established in 1974 in the garage of someone who started the rape crisis center along with 2 other women. And since then, we've come a long way from that time to where now we provide extensive training to advocates who are going to be dealing with survivors of sexual assault and their loved ones. I think Joyce said that the loved ones are touched, and it's so true. We get many, many calls from loved ones who are well-meaning but don't know what to do, don't know how to support a survivor. And so we take them through that process of helping them identify how to best support a survivor. So we offer counseling, we offer advocacy, we go with people to a medical clinic, to the SART house where forensic evidence is collected from their bodies and where they undergo a legal interview. And we're there to hold a hand. Sometimes I've had advocates who come back and say to me, the survivor wanted me to sing with her while she was on the medical table. And they do. They sing their favorite songs, or whatever that survivor needs in order to get through that experience. We try to step it up to do that. On the others, and then once they've gone through that, we also, for the majority of people, we provide counseling. We provide counseling one-on-one. We provide counseling in groups, and we see that transformation that I talked about a bit ago happen. On the other side, we also provide educational services to the community, because the issue of sexual violence seems overwhelming, and it is. When you look at hear the nightly news, the first 3 or 4 stories sometimes have to do with sexual and domestic violence, and so it can be overwhelming. But we still want to be that beacon in the community that says, we don't have to tolerate this. We don't have to have this in our communities. We can move beyond having violence against women in its many forms. And so we do that through education. And we educate anyone who will listen and engage people in meaningful discussions about what it is to think about one's role in ending sexual violence. We all have a role to play in that. I can tell you right now that if as a community we leave it to the Rape Crisis Center, we won't end it. I guarantee that. What I also know is that if every single one of us in this room and beyond in our community becomes involved, that will change. I am sure of that. I believe in that social change, in that ability of our community to, again, transform. So that gives you, like, in a nutshell, what we do at the Rape Crisis Center. Let me say a little bit about human trafficking. And so glad that all of us here at the table, it's like a reunion each time we see each other. But we work with everyone here at the table in looking at this issue and other issues that affect sexual violence. And I guess I wanted to say that probably it was about, I want to say maybe like 9 or 10 years ago, I was a part of an informal gathering, and maybe Joyce remembers, at Phyllis DiPicciotto's house, where we talked about human trafficking. And Joyce, of course, in her very brilliant self, educated all of us about what human trafficking looked like here, and we had people from out of our area coming to do the same. And that impressed me so much that within a year or so of that gathering, we brought a training specifically directed at law enforcement. It was one of our Sexual Assault Awareness Month activities during April. And what we did was we brought someone from the FBI, there was a victim advocate, as Megan mentioned. We also brought someone from CAST, which is Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking, and they were the content experts on this issue. And they talked about not only domestic trafficking, as we're talking about here now, but they also talked about trafficking across international and state lines. And what they said that had not occurred to me was that we in Santa Barbara are in a very prime location for trafficking. Why? Because we're in between San Francisco and Los Angeles, which are ports of entry. And sometimes out of those, they want to get away from those ports of entry to communities that somewhat, you might say, are more sleepy than San Francisco and Los Angeles. And so here we are. And so, yes, it happens here in Santa Barbara, and I think it's yet to be discovered. What I can tell you about that training that we conducted with law enforcement, it was probably over a 2 or 3 day period, was that at the end of that training, 2 detectives, one from PD, one from sheriffs, raised their hand and said, I am now going to go back and look at some cases that I've closed with this new lens. So that tells us that, with awareness, with education, with training, we are then able to identify and recognize the issue of trafficking here in our community. When Prop 35 came up, I spoke with other women and other political shakers in town about the importance of supporting that proposition, because it, for the most part, provides monies for training for law enforcement. There's a little bit for advocacy, but that didn't matter to me. I want to see the training happen because that's what will move us forward in this issue. Let me now move to talk about how we work with survivors of trafficking. And what I can say is that our work with them is not very different from our work with other survivors of sexual violence. One thing that we're very careful about is to build that trust and build that rapport. And in order to do that, we validate their experience, their relationship with the pimp, their relationship with the traffic rings. Why? Because they have seen that as an integral part of their life. I think someone else was mentioning that they receive material goods from them, a nice haircut, some jeans, whatever those material goods are, they receive them from them and they feel protected from them, not from them, but by them. And so that, we have to give some validation to that. We don't discount that, because if we do, then they will run away from us as well. They won't build that rapport with us. And once we build that trust, then we start in with the education. Then we start exploring with them the questions about safety, about exploitation, about pulling them away from loved ones, away from family, holding families under threat. Sometimes we were talking about why someone gets into something like this, and some of that has to do with families. The traffickers, the traffic rings, or the pimps provide promises to families that they are going to take care of their daughter, that they're going to move their daughter up in status, economic status. And although that never happens, there are those promises. And then with the person who's trafficked, then they say, well, if you don't do X, if you don't do Y, we know where your family lives. And they do. And so I know that I would do whatever I could to keep my family safe. And so you can see why that would move somebody, motivate someone. So let me talk about, so I said that we talk about, or we established a rapport and trust, but the other thing that we need in this area is language access. Language access is so important because at Santa Barbara Rape Crisis Center, given the demographics of our community, we staff with English speakers and Spanish speakers. But we see with trafficking other languages that are needed. And so what we've done kind of as a Band-Aid in the interim is to contract with a language access line. And they will, at any moment, 24 hours a day, we can call them up and ask them to interpret for us. So if we have someone who is from an Asian country or from Middle Eastern countries and we don't speak the language, then we can call upon this language service. So I think that that's very important to keep, to stay aware of that. And I think that's all I want to tell you for now. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Can I impose again? I have one story. Elsa spoke of the fact that advocates are there for people and whatever it is they need. And this one person, while they were on that table being examined, they were singing with them. I once prosecuted a 19-year-old man for viciously raping an 81-year-old woman. And she happened to be a virgin. It was the most horrible experience you could imagine for her. And one would imagine she'd be on that table weeping. But she was on that table and she wanted to tell jokes. And Elsa's advocates sat there and they told jokes. They swapped jokes for 20 minutes. And she told me later, you know, that must have seemed very bizarre to that woman in there, but she helped me through hell. Thank you.
Thank you, Elsa. I was thinking that Elsa, if she told me everything was going to be all right, I would believe every word of it. You have that feeling about you. Well, we're doing really well on time, and ladies, we're going to take a little break right now. So, excuse me. Oh my gosh, questions.
Okay, Elsa, on the staff of the Rape Crisis Center, do you have male counselors as well?
We do. We have male counselors. We staff the hotline with female advocates because at this point in our community's history of dealing with the issue, I think the response to female advocates is still necessary. However, we ask if they would like to speak with a male advocate. In particular, we ask males if they want to speak with a male advocate, and we have them available, both English and Spanish-speaking males. However, some men do accept to speak with a male advocate. I would say the majority still would rather speak with a female advocate. There's some issues around just feeling that embarrassment for men. As you can imagine, there's a lot of stigma for women to disclose this kind of experience. It seems to be, from our experience, a greater stigma for men to disclose that experience. What has helped in having men come forward are the issues that have surfaced around the abuse by the clergy in the Catholic Church, and also the abuse in the Boy Scouts. That seems to have prompted more men to come forward.
Other question?
Right here.
This would be a question.
You need a microphone. Because it's being recorded, okay?
Run, Bill. Excellent.
Question, probably both for Elsa and Joyce. Sexuality seems so much a given and so powerful. First of all, are there cultures where the sexuality takes a nonviolent role in the society? And how could we head ourselves towards that? I mean, the clergy and Boy Scouts and so on, it happens. What do we do?
Let's ask Margaret Mead. You want to take that one?
Be my guest and I'll try.
I don't know the answer to that.
I guess I'm not familiar with cultures who don't have sexual violence in their culture or in their society. However, what I do see is that those that the worse you treat women, then that seems to be a greater incidence of sexual and domestic violence. So us treating women as second-class citizens, as not fully powerful, is not something that's helpful for us.
That fits.
Makes sense. We have time for another question, then we're going to take a little break.
A comment. Sweden is having a lot of success by decriminalizing the prostitute and criminalizing the perpetrator. And so in world statistics, they are having the best success in the community. So it's an indirect answer to her question. Okay.
All right, let's take a little break. Speaker is Lisa Grizel. She's the Clinical Director for Domestic Violence Solutions. Please take a look at your sheet for more information on Lisa. I do want to shout out to Marcia Marcoux. Is that correct, Marcia Marcoux? Are you still here?
She's just stepped out.
Okay, well, she's the Associate Executive Director, and she offered Lisa as our speaker today, saying, quote, Lisa is much more qualified to speak on the issues and has agreed to be part of this amazing panel representing domestic violence solutions. Lisa's background is far too valuable to waste the opportunity with me, which I thought was very generous of her.
I wish she was here.
She's hearing it. There, okay. Marcia, we have just touted you, so you missed it. You'll have to watch the film. Film at 11. For the past 17 years, Lisa has provided clinical training, supervision on topics including domestic violence, treatment of trauma, effects of violence on children, cultural diversity, co-occurring disorders, and family systems dynamics. So enough of me, and thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great honor for me to be here with all of you today, and it is a great honor for me to be Clinical Director for Domestic Violence Solutions of Santa Barbara County. My hope here today is to inspire all of you to own your power in the fight that we have against violence towards women and violence towards families. At our vigil in September, we have our yearly vigil where we honor the women and the children that have been murdered in Santa Barbara County through domestic violence. And at that vigil, Marcia got me to speak there too. She's a tricky lady. There I did want to share something I had shared. I do want to honor all the folks on this panel and their teams and the others in our community, including law enforcement and teachers and doctors and nurses, for this is the frontline work. We are actually seeing this trauma. We're hearing the story. And we do experience vicarious trauma because of the horrendous stories we see and we are witnessed and hear that we are witness to. So always a smile, a pat, anything really helps us to continue in our fight to begin to lessen this epidemic of violence against women and families in the world, and certainly here in Santa Barbara County. So my story is that, and I'm so glad Joyce was telling family stories, because here I go, but I'll keep it limited. That age, when my son was about 7 or 8, so this is pre-adolescence, right? Not during adolescence. And all of you mothers know that have sons, the look in their eye, they believe that we have the best singing voices. They believe we are the most beautiful women. They believe all these fabulous and kind of delusional things about us. And he came to me, and he's got these really, really beautiful big brown eyes, and they were just torn with concern. And he said, "Mom, you're going to lose your job. You're not going to have a job anymore." And I said, "Son, why do you think that?" He says, "'Cause you're going to make all the pain go away for all the families, and you're not going to have a job anymore." Well, now I'm kind of stuck, right? Because I want to leave him of his stress that I still am going to be employed. I don't have that power to eradicate violence in Santa Barbara County. But I saved him because I knew he was too young for me to say to him how big of an epidemic this is, how big our fight and all of our fight really, really is. So I told him that would be okay and I'd get another job. And he was like, "Okay, you can get another job." And that satisfied him. That never leaves me. I do have the honor of working with the women and children that we bring into our programs. And in the little children's eyes, I do see my son's eyes. And they're looking at their mothers, and they're looking at us with that same innocence and that same hope that we can make things better. Well, so I want to share with you a little bit about what I was not able to tell him at that age. And I do want to back what you ladies were saying. As families, our obligations to raise our children and our sons to not replicate violent behavior in their own adult lives. It's very, very powerful. I want to give you the definition of domestic violence, first of all. This is from our national representatives. Domestic violence is a willful intimidation, physical assault, battery, sexual assault, and or other abusive behaviors as part of a systematic pattern of power and control perpetrated by one intimate partner against another. It includes physical violence, sexual violence, threats, and emotional abuse. The frequency and severity of domestic violence can vary dramatically. What domestic violence is indeed an epidemic affecting individuals in every community, and regardless of age, we heard some stories, economic status, sexual orientation, gender, race, religion, nationality. So I think there's a common misbelief that it only happens in certain kind of families. I hear things like, "Well, no, they're from a nice family," or "They're from a Christian family." And me, we need to understand it is across all boards. I also want you and everyone to know, if you don't already, that one in every 4 women will experience domestic violence in their lifetime. That is 1.3 million women yearly that endure domestic violence. Almost a third of female homicide victims are killed by intimate partners. In almost 80% of these cases, physical abuse did occur prior to the homicide. This is big as far as intervention is, that we believe any early intervention is a powerful intervention, and we're planting seeds if we aren't completely successful. I also want you to know that many women have told me that during pregnancy was the first time they were physically battered, or that the abuse got more severe and more violent during pregnancy. Domestic violence is one of the most chronically unreported crimes. So I want you to know that my statistics, I believe, are off. I believe there really is more, because it is so. I have met so many women and men and children that are now adults that lived with violence many years ago and never spoke up. So we know, as is child abuse and rape and other violences, it's not easy to come forward. And that's part of our job, I believe, as community members, to begin to make it more and more comfortable for everyone to speak of these crimes and these hideous acts going against women and children and all family members. It is true, domestic violence and all violence affects the entire family. It isn't just the victim. And indeed, at times, family members are also in danger. We get restraining orders with Elizabeth's help and include mother-in-laws and others that have been a part of perpetrating the abuse also. We at Domestic Violence see it very much as a family and a societal issue. Along with physical abuse, we talked about emotional and psychological, sexual and financial abuse, all falling under domestic violence. I will also tell you that I've met many, many victims that have said that the emotional and psychological abuse was way more horrendous than the physical. We can see the physical. We sometimes kind of know how to help that out, maybe at least Band-Aid it, help it along. The severe emotional and psychological abuse causes all kinds of issues for the family and for the victims of domestic violence. We see women then beginning to struggle with mental health issues, with drug and alcohol issues, with inability to maybe work, with inability to maybe learn and function in different ways. Again, you can imagine how the self-esteem is just slowly being battered and beaten down over years of this sort of abuse. I will say I would love to be part of helping learn more about trafficking, because I'm going to put my lunch money on a lot of victims of human trafficking are coming from violent homes. And I know children that flee from violence from watching it. Also, children are 4 times more likely to be abused themselves if they're living in a home where domestic violence is going on. I will also tell you, I have interviewed hundreds of inmates and hundreds of victims of domestic violence who will tell me only one answer to this question: which was more difficult, being abused yourself or having your mother abused? A child would rather be beat themselves than to know that their mother is in harm's way in any way, shape, or form. We have so many inmates in prison right now. I bet Joyce can tell me, I think last time I heard it was like 85% of our men in prison for homicide were little boys growing up in domestic violence. They become vulnerable to all sorts of other behaviors that are hurt themselves, their victims, and the community. So we see it as this gigantic issue that takes all of us to fight and work against. The other thing I want to talk about is that domestic violence is indeed child abuse. Sometimes I've heard people say, well, they're married, they're adults, let them be. They go to church on Sunday, just let this be. But I can't, because it's child abuse. even if the children do not see it. They know it's happening, they can hear it, they can feel it. We see stories and hear stories of children being involved in the abuse themselves. So working with the children and honoring that part is very important and near and dear to our hearts. I think it's also what hurts our hearts, but it also what fuels my passion for continuing this work. So did I mention already that children that grow up in domestic violence are 4 times more likely as adults to be either perpetrators or victims in domestic violence? I know that I've shared a lot of, and others, pretty scary, sometimes overwhelming facts to hear. So I want to talk about some things we do know from research about, and for what we've witnessed in our work with survivors of domestic violence. It is what we call a transgenerational issue. So when I say that a child is 4 times more likely if they grow up in violence, to become a perpetrator or a victim, that is the part of the transgenerational issues. In almost all long-term or intense domestic violence, in their history, when we do what we call genograms, we're going to find it throughout the history of the family. And I really think this is important because this is where our power is. A mother or a father has the power to break a transgenerational pattern that has gone on maybe for hundreds of years in their family. And this is often how we empower women to not return, because most women it takes 7 times before they leave for good, is when we talk about their power and talk about the crime against their children. It's the little boy crying, shaking in the corner that is now 4 times more likely to grow up and hurt physically someone that he believes has a love relationship with. And I say this because our perpetrators, I think we need to understand, are victims also. So our greatest power is to stop it in that generation with those children. And that's what we're about at Domestic Violence Solutions. That's what we're about in our partners. We cannot do our work at all without the community partners that we work with. So I want to shift just and tell you a little bit about Domestic Violence Solutions as an organization and what we do. We do many things. Marcia and I like to go out and talk and spread the news. Education is the biggest way we're going to make changes in everything that we address. All of us here, I think we have something in common, and that is to lessen violence in our community, lessen violence for women. So we're big on education and research. We have folks out in the high schools, because that's a whole nother thing you can get me going on. We see at Santa Maria High domestic violence starting, in 13, 14-year-olds, where they're going home and it's treated as a normal thing. So we want to get in early to help cause change. One thing at domestic violence, if I didn't get to all of you, I will, but I gave you little, yes, thank you, Jane. These are our crisis line numbers. If you'll hold on to this, because you all know someone that's in this, whether you know it or not. And it's the right time. Domestic violence, another thing we know is there's a cycle. So I say, we have a window of opportunity after the battery, before the honeymoon is usually our most powerful. And that's why I want you to have the crisis line numbers. What domestic violence offers is bilingual 24/7 crisis lines that anyone can call. A victim, a family member in the community, and call there, and it will be answered. And we're very proud of being able to sustain that long term. Last year we had 1,500 crisis calls at least. Also, we have a program called Divert that we are very proud about. I have been traveling in other parts of the world and had a DA once and someone else come to me and know about our Divert program, because it is not widespread. It is very unique. Our bordering counties do not have it. So what Divert is that our advocates respond with law enforcement on the scene. Once the scene is secured, because we got to keep our advocates safe, they're able to go in and speak with the victims. And at this time offer not only the support in that moment, but referrals and also considered if they need shelter. So from this, and that's a whole nother, I'd love to tell you way more about that, but I can get talking and need to keep it to not too long. We also have 3 emergency shelters here in Santa Barbara County that we're very proud of: Santa Maria, Lompoc, and Santa Barbara. I do want you to know these are nice homes where the families get their own bedrooms. You know, you hear shelters, you're kind of picturing maybe a bunch of bunk beds in a big room. So our families do have their own rooms. And we also have 2 transitional programs. These are 2 apartment buildings. One's in Santa Barbara here and one's in Santa Maria, where families from our shelters can apply to live up to 18 months. Obviously, 45 days, even 18 months, if this has been something that someone has grown up with and been in years of abuse, it takes some time. The families, the women, children can come up pretty emotionally and physically distraught. The healing process can take time. And someone was talking here about how resilient humans and especially children are. It is just amazing the resiliency we see when families come into our shelters. But anyway, we're very proud to have the longer term. Some women have never worked before. We also get women where their lives were, it was attempted murder. They've been strangled. There's a whole more things that go on with strangulation. They need some time to heal. So what we offer is a safe environment. These are confidential settings. We keep them as safe as we can through many means of security. And one of the women will tell you how valuable it is when they come into a shelter and meet other women that are going through the same thing. I call that milieu therapy. It's really important. It has nothing to do with us, except that we've put them together to live together. That is amazing healing that goes on at that time. Our advocates also offer ongoing and regular case management, advocacy, referrals into the community. We began immediately working hand in hand with Victims Witness and legal aid. There's restraining orders. There's all sorts of legal pieces to domestic violence also if law enforcement is involved. In addition, we have therapists and interns that offer individual, family, child, and group therapy on a weekly basis to all of our programs. Victims after a physical assault or years of emotional can actually present incoherent. They'll say, well, I don't remember what happened. Right? Because if you're strangled, you might not. And also the emotional distress that goes along with this kind of battery, and it's such a complicated system that goes on as children are involved and finances are involved. I mentioned that we're into the outreach quite a bit. We also work with, rape crisis, social services, a lot of reliance on other agencies really to get the full need met. I'm done. Is that a this? Yes. I told you I can get to talking. And you know what? I'm on my final thing right here. So yes, I did want to hope that I have given, although we've given some really ugly information, we believe strongly that we can affect this change, and I know we are, and I know as a community, look at these strong women here, and all of this community to speak up. And when a woman brings up that she's being treated wrongly, don't ask her what she did or why. This is one of the worst things that happens to victims, or why did you stay, or oh, come on, that That's not so. Listen. You don't have to have words always. Please listen. So thank you so much. Thank you.
I think that was very powerful. Yes.
I have a question. I haven't heard much about programs to help the men who are themselves victims.
So I'd love to.
Use your mic.
Okay, thank you, sir. We do indeed serve men. We do not have a shelter for men, but men do call. We do go respond with law enforcement when men are the victim, and we do take crisis calls for the men.
I'm talking about the abusers.
Oh, the abusers. So the 52-week batterers intervention program, there's a couple of set up through our courts. There's a couple of agencies here in Santa Barbara that offer that program. And I think I know I've worked with batterers for years and ran the batterers intervention program. Also, when they are released, they're often parole and probation have opportunities for them if they will seek them out.
So I have a dream, and there are 3 programs like this in the United States, and I want to see one here in Santa Barbara County. The women and the children who are abused get to stay in their home, and the men get put in a shelter and get the education and training they need.
All right.
The other dream I have is that sometimes people won't go to shelters because they don't want to leave their pets, and they know their pets are going to be abused. They get left behind. I'd like to see a shelter where people can bring their pets to.
And I'd like to tell you, Joyce, Santa Ynez Shelter does let us. We have an agreement with them that we can bring in dogs because many women do not leave because abuse has occurred on the pets and threats of what will happen to the pets. And
It's
we
a
need
little
to broaden
vague,
that out.
They may have a ceiling, whatever. We're still working on it.
Can I add?
We're optimistic, though.
I hope I don't show up with a dog because I haven't heard about that.
Can I add just before I get to speak? On the restraining orders, we do ask for exclusions to have the batterer removed from the home and the family and the victims in the home, and also protection for the family pet. So it's included in our civil orders.
It is.
One more question, Charlie?
Is there a problem securing funds for what you're doing?
Yes. Absolutely. Who are you asking?
Was that a question or a rhetorical comment?
Very much so.
When I was 5 years old, I moved to Ojai with my mother and my brother. And I always wondered why. We were in Minnesota. We had a nice family. They were admirable people, high self-esteem. Turns out my father tried to kill my mother and my brother, which I did not know until my mother died, because I read the divorce papers with police reports attached. I didn't even know they did police reports in the 50s. And I cannot believe that happened, that my mother was a survivor of all this. And that is probably why I'm so interested in it all and didn't even know. Fortunately, my brother is okay, but I watch him. So I just wanted to share that with you because we all have something.
And your mom was a hero for getting you and your brother out of that.
My mother was a hero. It was attempted murder, and he ended up dying, and it's also sordid. And I thought, I came from this great family in Minnesota. Well, okay, delusion is a great thing, too.
That's right.
But that's my story, and that's why I'm so interested. Next we have, oh my gosh, my notes.
Our Elizabeth.
I got so excited. I'm just all over the place. We have 2 speakers from Legal Aid, and we have enough time so that you can both speak. One of them is Elizabeth Diaz, and the other one is Emily Allen. I'm not going to say a lot because I'm going to let them say whatever they have to say, but I just want to thank you both and all of you for everything.
Hello, thank you for the invitation. It's going to be brief, actually, because Emily and I are sharing the spotlight today. I love what I do. I love my job. It is depressing, but I think I get to see the victims when they are moving on, when they're ready to leave, and we're ready to get restraining orders or custody and visitation orders, divorces. So I'll tell you a little bit about the program. Our Family Violence Prevention Program from Legal Aid. It's the only agency that offers legal services to victims of domestic violence, elder abuse, and sexual abuse. We assist victims with protection orders, custody and visitation orders, divorces, and U visas. U visas it's for victims of crimes that are non-citizens. We're able to obtain legal permits to be in the country under the Violence Against Women Act. We have 3 offices countywide. In our Santa Barbara office, we have 2 attorneys. One is both Kate and I are dedicated to the family violence prevention. We recently were awarded a grant from the Office of Violence Against Women to hire a full-time DV attorney in Santa Maria that covers Santa Maria and Lompoc, limited in Lompoc, but we're doing what we can, which funds help us to be able to cover more, but right now we're doing with what we have. The grant also covers Emily's work, which she will talk about. And let's see. Thanks. Let's see. I wanted to share some numbers with you and a story. Okay, so the numbers that I have are 2013. The year 2013, we assisted 411 victims of abuse with restraining orders, obtaining custody and visitation orders, and assistance with U visas and divorces. Breaking it down, we assisted 249 adults and 162 children. Included in those numbers are seniors that are over 65 years old and are suffering abuse from caretakers, neighbors, or family. Let's see, and I wanted to share a story that we assisted. So here is one of our clients that we assisted last summer. Linda and Nicholas, not their real names, have been married for 6 years, together for 10 years. They have 2 minor children under the age of 7 years. Nicholas had been physically and verbally abusive throughout the relationship, but more abusive with Linda after the children were born. The most recent incident of abuse occurred last summer, 2014. Nicholas choked Linda in front of their children. This happened on a Monday morning as the children were getting ready to go to school. Nicholas had been aggressive with her since the day before, accusing her of having an affair. That morning, he grabbed her by the neck and began choking her. He choked her with such force that they fell into a closet. After physically struggling with him, she was able to free herself from his grip and get away from him. Nicholas backed off after seeing that the children were watching. Everything seemed to calm down. Linda and Nicholas proceeded to take the children to school. But once they were at school, he started in again, and yelling and cursing and saying vulgar things about the kid's mother in front of the children. I get emotional. Sorry. I get really emotional. When I'm actually dealing with clients, they're in front of me, it's the strong, we're going to get through this. But when I look back and realize, wow, what these kids went through, they didn't deserve this.
The minute you stop caring, you should get out of the business.
Thanks. Okay, let me put myself together. Let's see. So that day, they dropped off the kids at school. Nicholas dropped off Linda at work. And at lunchtime, he came back to harass, insult her again. She proceeded to work. After work, he picked her up, and they drove home. He continued to insult her, abuse her, and she realized, what am I doing here? I don't want to be here anymore. So she told him, I'm leaving you. Well, he, upset by that, picked up a chair and broke the chair on top of her, breaking it into pieces. She got her children, walked out, even though he was baiting her, calling her names, wanting him just to get a reaction from her. She didn't, she left. She called her family for help. From her family's house, she called the police and then exposed 10 years of abuse that no one knew. Family didn't know, police didn't know, no one knew. That day at the
cousin's house, I believe. She was taken to the hospital. There was a concussion. They found a concussion, bruises, and that night, DVS was called, and a divert advocate went to the home, assisted her with shelter for her and her kids, and referred legal aid. And I was the attorney that met with her a few days after. Was able to take pictures of her bruises so I could have that as evidence. And we filed a restraining order against Nicholas. Full custody, no visitation to him. We obtained the restraining order for the 3 years. He was later prosecuted for the domestic violence and is currently in jail. But we also were able to obtain a divorce. She is free, she has a full-time job, she is happy, and she is no longer suffering from any abuse. Thank you.
Hello, so my name is Emily Allen, and as Elizabeth mentioned, I also work at Legal Aid Foundation of Santa Barbara County, and I work on a special project called the Common Ground Santa Barbara County project, and it's volunteer-driven project. You might have heard about us recently because we're very involved in the recruiting and training of the volunteers that go out and do the point-in-time count and vulnerability survey. And so that started in 2011. Countywide, we had over 500 people come out and volunteer to participate in this count and survey. And there was this feeling, if there's so many volunteers out there who are willing to do this, we really need to create a system to train them and keep them engaged on a year-round basis. And, you know, in 2013, I remember as we were recruiting volunteers, we were worried, you know, are we going to get 500 volunteers again? What if we don't? And we actually had over 600 volunteers participate that year. And also, just this January in 2015, we had over 600 volunteers countywide participate. And, you know, what we find in doing this surveying is we ask questions about sexual assault and domestic violence, and we see these really, you know, terrible instances among people experiencing homelessness. And so I had always, you know, been aware of that. But it wasn't until we started the process of applying for this Violence Against Women Act grant that would allow us to better serve what the federal government calls underserved populations. And so we wrote this grant, as Elizabeth mentioned, to provide better representation for Spanish speakers and non-citizens, especially in the north part of our county, but also to do outreach to homeless survivors. And it's countywide, but I'm primarily based in Santa Barbara. So as I started to do this research in assisting in putting this grant together, I came across an article, No Safe Place, Sexual Assault in the Lives of Homeless Women. And we put this grant together, we applied. The first time we applied, we actually didn't get the grant, but they said that we'd been highly ranked, and they actually invited us to apply the second year. And so we did that. And I remember in the days we were putting together the grant again, the second time around, literally, you know, in those last days, I got a call from one of our volunteers who said, you know, there's this homeless couple who were terribly sexually assaulted on the beach in Santa Barbara, and we need to respond. You know, this couple, the woman 62, the man 69. You know, the man, an honorably discharged veteran. Really, I've gotten to know this couple. Just a pleasure to meet these people. Really kind, you know, gentle people. You know, they were terribly assaulted. They called police. They had, you know, great response from law enforcement. They felt really supported. They've worked with the DA and victim witness. You know, the two men accused are in jail and court proceedings are, you know, moving forward. But what I saw in those 2 nights as we were working on finalizing this grant was this couple that wanted to stay together because, you know, they were each other's safety net. But we didn't really have shelters that were set up to keep them together. You know, through personal relationships, we worked together, and shelters, Casa Esperanza made special accommodations, in their computer room. They created a safe place for them to stay together, which was really amazing. The volunteers who knew them from doing outreach prior to this horrible incident were able to stick with them. And, these were people who didn't necessarily use the shelter system, but, these volunteers were able to really encourage them, this is, a safe place for you, you really need to be here. We reached out to Santa Barbara City Housing Authority, which were really amazing, and in just record time, this couple was actually able to move into housing together, and they have this, wonderful home, volunteers that continue to meet with them and assist them, and it really made for me in putting this grant together realize how real this is. And so, I mentioned the vulnerability survey and point in time count. A lot of that is collecting data. And I didn't necessarily know I would be so interested in some of this data, but I've really come to find it important. I think that, it's really critical that we know what the problem is out there and that, we understand, what the needs are. And research typically directed at homeless women, but we know that men are also victims of sexual assault too. The most comprehensive and rigorous studies on homeless women conducted to date note extraordinarily high levels of abuse and victimization that homeless survivors endure before, during, and after episodes of homelessness. And I think, that's really important. 13% of homeless women reported having been raped in the last 12 months. 9% of homeless women reported at least one experience of sexual victimization in the last month. Also disturbing is the findings that compared to their low-income housed counterparts, the sexual assault experiences of homeless women are more likely to be violent and to include multiple sexual acts. 92% of homeless mothers had experienced severe physical and/or sexual violence at some point in their lives. 43% report sexual abuse in their childhood. 63% report intimate partner violence in adulthood. And when you look at homeless women who also have mental illness, that's makes them even more vulnerable to victimization. In-depth studies have shown that 97% of participants who were homeless and had a mental illness reported experience of violent victimization at some point in their lives. So, the effects of this victimization, 45% report suicide attempts, 47% report depression, 45% report drug or alcohol dependence, and 39% report post-traumatic stress. Increased risk factors are childhood abuse, substance dependence, length of time homeless, location while homeless, presence of mental illness, and engaging in economic survival strategies like we've discussed. This can include panhandling and sex trade. And another area that, my research has directed to me is LGBTQ youth. A growing body of research suggests that bolsters the conclusion that LGBTQ youth, and these are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered youth, represent approximately 20% of homeless youth. And it's a disproportionate to the number of LGBTQ youth in the general population. And LGBTQ youth many experience abandonment and severe family conflict stemming from their sexual orientation and gender identity. And both are factors are also present: physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, substance abuse by parents, and mental health disabilities. So LGBTQ youth are particularly vulnerable during episodes of homelessness. So all of this, all of this data and just our own experience, shows me that for some sexual assault survivors, there really, is no safe place to go. I think as a community, especially around the issue of domestic violence, there was a time when, as it was described, women created safe homes and shelters. And what I've found is that, sometimes for sexual assault survivors, there's no guaranteed real access to shelter. And that's something that I think, moving forward as a community, it's, really critical that we address. So one thing I always like to, mention is that, our program, Common Ground Santa Barbara County, is very much based on volunteerism, and really anyone can volunteer. We have a volunteer training coming up, and if you're interested, I'd love to talk to you more about this. But whether it's with our organization or other organizations, you can be an advocate. And for somebody who's going through this experience, having that advocate there with them, both at, the time of the trauma and, going with law enforcement or to the hospital, but then after that also, finding that stable housing, because without stable housing and, stability, to expect somebody to really recover from this trauma, it's just not realistic. So I think just to end, there are ways that if you would like to be involved, everyone really can be involved in, assisting survivors. Thank you.
I think that's very important, what Emily just said. We can all be advocates. We can all hold someone's hand and help. What would we do without these ladies? We have a few minutes if you have any more questions, and I'm sure they're happy to answer them.
I just want to add something.
Certainly.
Okay. First of all, I've known Emily since she was 16 and in high school and was on the mock trial team. And I had the pleasure of coaching her. And it was very clear, even at 16, that you were going to become the great attorney you are today.
Aww.
You do amazing work.
That's
I
high
also wanted to
praise.
add two more things. First of all, I prosecuted a case for a woman, a homeless, schizophrenic, alcoholic woman who was experiencing all of those things at the same time. She was brutally beaten. I charged the defendant with torture, and her bloodied body was 6 feet outside that door to the right. The man is serving life, but the idea that this is happening not just in this town, but right next to this building in that parking lot. And it's because of the work that Emily is doing that we're able to actually deal with this kind of work and help these women survive. She's okay now. She's back home. She's with her family. But what a horrible crime to have occurred. And I just want to mention another program that Megan has. She started, I don't know, a dozen years ago, victim witness program that raises emergency funds for crime victims, and Megan did this on her own. She's got a race going in April every year, and as a result of raising those funds, those emergency non-government funds, when we don't have time to go through red tape, we were able to put that couple that Emily just spoke to you about in a hotel. So they were able to be in a hotel because of the funds raised, and also because we hooked them up to victim compensation funds, they were able to get additional work. So what we do, we all do together, and we can't do it without your help. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question.
I was curious about Emily and Elizabeth. You're the place where you try to use the court system for taking care of these matters. The others can kind of move people around. What happens when undocumented people come and you have to file legal papers? What does the rest of the system do with them?
Actually, judges do not ask. The question never comes up. So we file with total confidence, custody, visitation, that they are not going to be deported. After, we also assist them with the U visa process, so they could obtain legal work and support their children.
If you don't mind, I'd like to add something to that. Often when I go out and have a little more time to present, one of the things that I will say is that the fact that a person is either here with legal status or not, does not impact the availability of services as far as many of our programs are concerned. And that includes victim compensation. Victim compensation benefits come from offender fines and penalties. So it's not tied to a person's legal status. The U-Visa program that Elizabeth just mentioned is available for victims of violent crime who can apply to the federal government to someday perhaps have residency status. And the district attorney's office is a big part in assisting victims of violent crime to substantiate whether in fact they were a victim of violent crime for the federal government. That program has far exceeded, I think, the federal government's expectations, and we get about 400 requests a year. The quota is $10,000 or 10,000 people a year that can apply, and I just understood that they've already tripled that and aren't going to be able to get people into the program. But it's just demonstrative of the need out there and some of the vulnerabilities in the immigrant population as well.
And just to add to Megan, if you don't mind, for domestic violence solutions, we do not discriminate. We certainly do not ask. It is not a part of acceptance into our program what their status is.
I think there's a 10,000 permit request limit per year, but once it's done, the cap has been reached, then they are on kind of a waiting list for the next year. I'm not sure if there are 2 years now, I think 2016, 2017 starting, but.
Thank you.
Hi, I guess this is working. Ladies, you guys are terrific. Thank you all for being here. You have been educational and inspirational. Really, I've heard that from several people. We appreciate it.
You're my hero, all of you.
Thank you. I have a question for Emily on the vulnerability survey. I keep getting emails in some language that I think is maybe Spanish. I have no idea. I get a couple a week about the vulnerability survey. First off, do you have any idea what that's all about, where they come from?
No, not in Spanish. No, I don't. We'll have to
It's
show
not
me.
English. It could be
Okay.
Portuguese or who knows. I don't know. I can't decipher it.
Yeah.
Secondly, do you have any preliminary count
that's a
figures
good-
that you could share with us?
That's a good question. There is a press conference being organized for the first Monday in March where more of the detailed data will be shared. And on our website, commongroundsb.org, you can look at the reports for 2011 and 2013, and we'll certainly post the report there. We know this is the first year we used smartphones and tablets to conduct the survey, and we know that over 1,000 were conducted with the smartphones and tablets, which was exciting because we didn't know, how people would adapt to that. But it's really great because it can be used, the vulnerability survey can actually be used year-round and is leading us in the direction of what we call coordinated entry, where everybody who's experiencing homelessness would, basically provide some of this data and information so that we can best figure out what resources to connect them to. Because we obviously have limited resources. You want somebody to be connected to the level of resources they need. So, for instance, the VI SPDAT survey, the SPDAT is Service Prioritization Decision Assessment Tool, would tell us if somebody really just needed help with a deposit and first month's rent, or do they really need that housing with supportive services, which, is a more high intensity level. We want to make sure that the person who needs that high level of services gets it. There's some exciting things, I'll just say, happening, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about that at next month's forum.
Thank you. Well, we have time for one more question.
I have a question for any member of the panel that could answer this regarding the prevalence of domestic violence or sexual violence against individuals with developmental disabilities or mental retardation.
We also assist with elder abuse dependent adult restraining orders. So that would qualify for any adult that's under 64, I believe, with any kind of limited or physical mental disability.
What we know is that people are more likely to be physically abused and sexually abused if they do suffer from some developmental disability. We've been attempting to be very sensitive to that at the district attorney's office, and when a case like that comes in, it gets a lot of attention. The problem and the frustration for all of us is that sometimes it's difficult to prosecute those cases because of the inability to communicate. So we depend heavily upon expert witnesses. And when we find them, we're able to vigorously prosecute those cases. Let me see if Megan has something else to add to that.
I think in terms of talking about underreported crimes, the first hurdle is getting those reports made and accessing the information about the abuse itself. And we have had efforts underway since about 1999 with dedicated staff that are more expert in this field and can go out and speak to community groups, and made some inroads there. But I think the challenge is bridging the gap between what's really happening and us knowing about it. We do have some forensic interviewers through the sexual assault response team primarily, who have expertise and training working with the developmentally disabled population. And we access the Independent Living Resource Center as well as another partner when those reports come forward to try to discern what has happened and meet that client where they are at their developmental level. It's a challenge. It's a big challenge.
It's a good question. Okay, one last.
Well, could you briefly describe next month's forum, which is on homelessness?
Emily could. Emily's the forum leader, and I'll let her give you a synopsis.
Well, it will be, I know, focused around some of the housing solutions, some of the housing solutions that we have in this county right now, and some that we don't yet have. And I know that, if you missed the that press conference with that point in time and vulnerability data, we'll be sharing some of that with you also.
Two more things. One, I would like to thank Joyce Dudley's mother. She's a lovely lady. And two, open your wallets and feed the kitty. And three, thank you, ladies. That was just wonderful. Elsa?
Jane, I have one more thing for everyone here, and that is that we are all great at providing services, the critical services that all of our community members who need these services receive. But I also ask you to think about the social change aspect to it, the educational, the awareness aspect to it. Because as I mentioned, that's the only way that we move toward eliminating these kinds of crimes. So I ask you to think about telling 2 people in your circles after you leave here about what you heard today. And I was wondering if I could get your commitment to tell 2 people in your circles about that. Who will raise their hand to do that?
Can we tell more?
You can tell more, but at least
Thank you.
2.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.